Time to do my research. This project seems pretty cool, but more importantly, look at their website. This is slick. Yeah, I need to hire their designer. I mean, look at these icons. Are those buttons? How do you even do that? You know, I gotta call Kevin. He's got to make me this website. Yeah, Kevin, it's Caleb. Hey, I was hoping you'd take a look at this website because I got distracted. What do you mean you blocked my number? I got a new number, of course.
All right, so here's the page that Caleb wants me to try and copy, and it is kind of cool with this, I'll admit. I like the effect, I like the tilt, and I think the most complicated thing for this is actually going to be at smaller sizes because that thing on the right actually like sneaks behind and still is, has like an overflow going on. We'll see what we can do there. Luckily for me, these are all images which I've already stolen from their site. So the images on there, that will make life a little bit easier. And their font seems to be a premium font. Because if I come here and I go to, actually I found it on DaFont, but there's in Firefox DevTools, there's a font thing. So if I do that and then select it, I think it's called Go Bold. I'm just going to try and find something somewhat similar over on Google Fonts, I think. But I'm only worrying about this. We're not going to do the whole thing because I think this is the coolest part of the site. There's other, like the animations and stuff are nice, but this is what my challenge is going to be on trying to do, and let's see how we can do it. And if you haven't watched one of these series before, it's sort of an unedited take unless I have a really long stretch where I get stuck. So if there's something terribly boring, I'll take it out. But my full thought process on trying to implement something like this. And yeah, we'll see how we can do with it. The feedback on this last time was really good, so let's hope that y'all enjoy it this time as well. So I've made a folder here that just has my images and nothing else going on. So let's make a new file, which is my index.html. Of course, I made that inside of my images folder, so let's drop that over there. And we'll make a CSS style.css file as well, and drop it outside my images folder. Now let's go to my index, and I'm just going to do an exclamation point and hit tab to get everything I need. That is Emmet, and it comes pre-installed in VS Code, and copied layout for Caleb. All right, so we're ready to get started. Let's just move this over here so I can see what we're trying to build. I'm going to leave it like that because this is the focus, and this part on the right is a little bit less interesting. So what I'm going to do is just get the HTML written for this because it's pretty straightforward, and then we'll worry about that part over here because that's, I think, the more interesting part, and we can do that together. All right, so if we look really quick at what I just did for this section right here, basically, I have an H2 where I just have a few classes on there that are going to be used to style it. I have my paragraph, which is the text. And then I created a div class of flex that's going to have my two links that are buttons in there. And I don't know where that closing div is. There it is. Okay, good. I thought I forgot it somehow. And so, yeah, those will be the two buttons that are right here. They do have a big gap between them, so we'll address that when we get more to there, because there's different ways we could do something like that. And this is sort of the more interesting area. So the first thing we'll do, and I'll explain why I'm actually going to use grid on here in a second. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do flex, and then I'm going to put large gap here. I'm going to do gap. Ooh. I haven't made a utility class like this before, and that's why I'm sort of thinking about it. Because if I made a gap class, I want to be able to use it on grid or flex, which is why I'm not doing like flex large gap or something. And if you're not used to the double hyphen, it's just saying like it's a modification of that. I'm just gonna do large gap, and we don't need it on that one. But again, I want to try and make something that could be used to continue a larger project, and not just this one thing, even though this is my focus right now. So if I have this as grid, what I'm also going to do then is I need to wrap all of this. So I'm going to do a Control-Shift-P, and then I can choose Emmet, and then it's wrapping with whatever I had selected. So then I can just do a div here. I don't need a class on that, I don't think. And let's just hit save, which should format my HTML for me. Thank you very much. So we have my div class of grid. This is going to be one column here. And then my second column is going to come here. So let's make a div. And this is the interesting div. This div is where we have all of these things. And I'm going to click on one to see what actually happens. That's a link, right? Yes, it's bringing me down to here, but that's like an anchor link. I didn't see it update there. So whoops. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. They're using some JavaScript there, so you're not getting the, so if you want to go back, you actually have to scroll up. But to me, that's a link. It's just an anchor link, not a button, in my opinion. So I'm going to make those links. So that's going to be a div of, what do we call this? Feature. So it's going to be a grid, first of all. We're going to use grid for this for sure. So grid, and then feature grid. Feature grid. Yeah, feature grid. It's like features, right? So we're going to call it a feature grid. So grid is a utility class. Feature grid's less a modification and more of just like what I want to call this area, which is why I guess it could be grid -- feature or something, but it's really something unique to here. It wouldn't, I assume, wouldn't be something you'd reuse for different stuff in different areas, though I guess maybe, whatever. I'm sticking with it like this. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7. So we're just going to do a dot. We're just going to do a feature grid. Yeah, we're going to do a in each a. So a times times 7, and then each one has an image inside of it. What's important for these, because it's only images, let's do that. Did it work? Oh, save. Okay, it's so annoying. Okay, I'm gonna fix this really fast. And I messed one of them up still. So annoying. I was putting them all on the source. There we go. I was putting them as the href instead of the source. Let's also just come down on these just to make sure the links render properly. So one thing that's important here is when we have links that don't have text content, we could do like an SR hidden thing for the content in there, but what I'm going to do is come on each one of these, and this would be like social links too or something like this. I will come in with an area label to label them all. So I'll do this quickly once again, but and what this does is it provides context to a screen reader that gets there that can't see the image. Even if your image has some alt text on it, it's nice that like you're providing an image. There's no context for what that link is doing. So we give an area. You can give an area label to that link to just give the context for what happens if we click on it. So low fees, and I'll fast forward this really fast. I'm typing those out and giving more context. I have no idea what any of these things are. I'm so out of the crypto world. Okay, so what do we want to do? So now, okay, we have that all in place. We can actually jump over to our CSS and start writing a few things in here. So I'm going to come in with, this is where I think a nice reset would be a good starting point. So I usually would start with Andy Bell Modern CSS Reset. And I mistyped that, but we still got there. And I can just copy this. I'm used to using it. I'm not going to break it down. I've looked at it in more detail in previous videos. So I'm just going to leave this basically here with what it's doing. With one exception, and that one, it's not even an exception. I just need to add some stuff now. So let's just come here and say body. First, the background is black and the color is white, because that's like the primary thing for the whole site. So I don't mind doing that on the body. That's perfectly fine. I'm also just going to add some padding of like 20 VW0. This is not something I would normally do. It's just now when let's get the preview going on this. When I have this actually open in the browser, I want, oh, my CSS isn't linked. Let's go and do that. That would help. Link CSS. There we go. So I just want space on the top and the bottom, so I don't it's not glued to the top, because I'm only building out this one section. For now, we'll change the font family maybe. We'll see if we need to, but font family will be sans serif for the moment. There we go. So we're off to a little bit of a start. It's not a fantastic one, but we have something. And okay, a few things now that I want are some utility classes. And actually, if we come and look at my buttons and stuff like that, These buttons, I did two things on them. I gave them a button class and then button primary and a button accent, because the button, if I look at the colors on the original ones, I'm just calling anything that has this pink as the primary color, and accent is the blue that we see there. And you could sort of do the same thing. This is like primary link or something, and then primary button there. These are secondary ones here, things like that. So it's like the two colors that are being used. So I'm doing primary and accent. It could be primary and secondary, whatever you want. You know, this maybe that's more of an accent or primary. I think primary, secondary, but I already named them and I'm lazy. So let's come to my CSS and do a few utility classes here. I'll make them quickly. Just, you know, I'll fast forward this part just so you don't have to see me write them all. All right, so the only thing I didn't set up was the text compressed for the font family. But just really fast, I set up a text primary, text accent for text colors, background ones for background colors, a flex class and a grid class. And what I did on these is I did a gap, and gap being on flex is the best, with an undefined custom property, because I didn't make my colors up here in my root. But what I decided to do here was, I really like doing this. So it's an undefined custom property. So if it can't find that, it will default to the value that I've put here. And so by doing this, I have this one rem fallback, which will be the default. But if ever I need to, like with my large gap, then what I could do is have my large gap and say that the gap, and then I can just say gap is like 4 rem or 3 rem or whatever I need. I can do that on a modifier class like that. Or if I had like a section like this one, which that was my feature grid. So dot feature grid, I can just modify gap, could be like 0.75 rem or whatever I need there. So it's just a nice way to be able to modify things quickly and easily with custom properties. So that's basically what I did. I stole the colors just through my dev tools, and now I think we're ready to go and get on over to here. Oh, I realized the font size on here is also bigger, a lot bigger. So that's my H2. Let's just add font size 700 because it's pretty big. So on my body, let's set up like 3 font sizes, or we'll just do 2, I think. We'll have my font size 700, which is going to be, I don't know how big that was. Let's just say it's a 3.5 rem, and then we'll have a font size 400, which is my basic one, which we'll say is 1.125 rem, which goes up to 18. So 2 other things we'll do is on my body here, we'll say the font size right here, font size is my var font size 400. And we also want to create that utility class. I have text utilities here, so we'll do it here. Font size 700 will be my var font size var font size 700. Again, this seems silly, just trying to clone this one thing, but I do find that it's, you know, it's worth. I'm trying to do it as if we're building out a bigger structure here. I guess on here we can also just do a line height of 1 point, or maybe even 1 would be enough. There we go. Okay, that looks a little better and closer to what we want. Except my base one might actually be a bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So I'm happy with that. I didn't style the buttons. I don't know if I'll bother doing them. I might just leave this for you guys to take over and finish off, because I want to focus on that thing on the side there and getting that to look the way it needs to look. So let's scroll all the way down. And here we can say my featured grid, and we can actually start styling it. So dot featured grid, and this is going to have a grid column. Grid template columns of 1FR, 1FR. I could use repeat there, but I'm faster that way. I called it featured grid, right? Feature grid. Ha, no, we have 2 columns. Awesome. One other thing though is this area here. This would be grid. I'm going to call it columns. Grid columns. And the reason I'm doing that, and ooh, maybe I could just do that same thing then. Let's grab grid columns here. No, it's going to be so different. Okay, no, we're not going to do it there. So here I have grid. Let's just do grid columns. So then it's a grid auto flow of column. There we go. We want these to be even. I'm just going to assume anytime you have the grid columns, you want them to be even. So we're going to do a grid auto column of 1FR. These are things that I have talked about before. This has to be S. This is not with an S. Mixes me up every time. There we go. 2 equal columns, which I think is more or less what they have with their layout. Maybe they're not perfectly equal. And section, okay, we'll just take this from here all the way to here. Shift Control P, wrap, and dot container. Save. Okay, so one more utility class that we can use just to keep things off the edge of the screen. We'll do it down here. Grid, flex, we'll do here. Dot container. We'll just say padding is 2 rem on the, or we'll do 1 rem on the left and the right, 0 top and bottom, and then we can say a max width of, I don't know, 65 rem. Might be a bit big for what I want to do now, and then a margin of 0 auto to hold it in the middle. And I'm going to bring this down, even though I think that's, you know, just so it doesn't get too big for the demo that we're working on right now. And actually, I'm going to make this a bit bigger just so we can keep my face from covering stuff. So there we go. I think that should be good. We're getting there. We're getting there. Now, let's go on my featured grid. Except we don't want 2, eh? We want 3, I think. 1FR maybe? Let's go back to the original one. Ooh, it has 4. It's getting so tiny. This is much wider than what I'm setting up in mind. What I'm going to do is let's just pull this down and move this up so I can keep that in view. Or maybe I should just take a screenshot of it, but whatever. We'll move this up like that and just scroll down. And something like that, like that. Okay, so I can see what I'm trying to create at least. Sorry if my face is covering it a little bit in the demo, but you should, you know, we're focused on that top part. So this is, okay, let's stop writing FRs then. This is gonna be a repeat of 4, 1FR. So we get 4 columns. 4 teensy columns, whatever, we get 4 columns, so that's good. Now is where the fun begins. So we will turn on my grid inspector so we can actually, anytime you're using grid, please, please, please use your grid inspector. It just makes life so much easier. So we can turn my grid on. So we have, okay, how many rows do we have? We have 2, I'm gonna say there's 4 rows? Like how many, 1, 2, 3 rows? Maybe it's, no, it can't be 3 rows, and I could inspect them to see how they did it, but I don't want to do that. I'm gonna, 6 rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna say there's 6 rows. Grid template rows of repeat 6, comma 1FR. Okay, it looks really broken right now, but we're gonna fix it. The question now is, okay, so let's see if I can do this. We're gonna say feature grid, because to me, the images are less important than the order that, like if you're putting different elements on the grid, you always want them to follow the same pattern. At least that's how I'm going to think about it. So if I change the order of these, this is the pattern I want. I want 2 tall ones on the sides. These are always here, and then this big one over here. And I always want that to be the same. So if I always want that to be the same, we're going to say A, or we can just do nth child. Won't limit it to links. Nth child. And we can, I think, get these right. We have the first one. So 1, first child. I could just do first child, but whatever. We'll say nth child 1. Can I do like a pattern here? 1, 4, 5, and 7. There might be like a 1n plus something we can do for that. But I think the easiest thing to do. 1, okay, we have 4 of them. 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember CSS, you do start counting at 1, not like other languages. 5, 5, and 7. There might be another way we could select those with a smaller selector. But then we want those to be a grid row of span 3. Span 3. Okay, I think that's working. We're going to leave it like that. Doesn't look how I was expecting it to, I won't lie. Let's go with my the second and my third one are going to get a grid row of span 2. And last but not least is the last one, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. The sixth one is going to get a grid row of span 4. I thought that would just sort of fall into place. Oh, okay. So this one's span 4, and this also, okay, this will help. Grid column of span 2. Oh no, I didn't do my columns good. Okay, I have 1. Yeah, that's okay. No, 1, 2. That should be okay then. Sorry, I thought that I might need more than 4 columns, but I think 4 is okay. These look narrower here, but I think it might just be the skew that's on it. Why is anti-slippage going there? I don't get why my anti-slippage is in the wrong spot. I just want to see the order of these then to see if I muck things up. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. Anti-slippage, Dex, and that one. Oh, okay. So this, okay. Because, yeah, okay. Okay. So what's happening is I haven't done grids like this in a while. The grid is, so let's add backgrounds to these guys. Why do I not see? Oh, it's the wrong grid. If I tune that grid on again, let's give all of my, let's just say star, background of HSL 360. I want it to be a bit transparent, so that's why I'm doing HSL. 50%, 50%, 50% over 0.2 or something. So you can see the images there. That's okay. We'll just, let me copy this. We're going to do different background colors on these so we can actually see what's happening. This one can come in, HSL, this can be like a 240. And there we go. Okay, so these guys are actually going all the way down to here. So this anti-slippage is trying to go over to the next column. And what I'm going to do for now is let's make that font size smaller. It won't matter. Okay, let's just leave it like this. They're tiny, but it's fine. And we'll just boost the opacity on this up to 1. Be easier to see. There we go. So this guy, we can't see because they actually have a background color on the image. But this guy here is actually spanning across 2 right now. So it's using all this space. And then, so these flow like that. Now this cell is the next, so it's like, when the grid's looking at this, it's going all the way across. Okay, I can't put anything here. I can't put anything here. Can't put something here, but oh, I can put something here because it's always going across, across, across. And so it gets to here and it goes, oh, I can put something here, so I will. And so anti-slippage gets put here. It can't fit Dex here, so Dex drops down to here because this is like the next, it can't fit here either because it's a span 2. So it goes, oh, I can't fit here, I can't fit here. Okay, here's the next place I can go. That fills up this whole area. This is the next one, so it goes after here. Where am I going? I'm going down to the next empty cell, which happens to be here. So right now it's a little bit of a mess. Now I'm not sure if this can fix it or not, but we're going to try. Grid auto flow of dense is not going to do it. Okay, I was hoping that would just sort of sort things out. The only thing that did was pull that up into this empty slot here. So it just means we need to work at it a little more. So one thing you could do is grid areas for this. The nice thing with grid areas, if you did need to redefine it within media queries, it'd be nice and easy to do. They never did, so I'm not going to. Like, I can shrink that down and it stays the same all the time. So this one is a grid column of, so let's turn my line numbers on actually. I just have to find my dev tools. Let's turn those grid line numbers on. So we want it to go from line 2 to line 4. So we can say that. That's my grid column. So I can say start at 2 and span over 2 columns. So that forces it, and it's actually made new stuff because it couldn't go here because something was already there. So it's forced its way down to here. But now on the grid row, I can tell it that it has to start at line number 3. So we can say start at line 3 and go over 4. And then that slots into the spot we wanted it to go. And it's going 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I feel like my grid is a little mucked right now with how things are going. I'm a little concerned with why do I have a height that is so big on my rows. The gap is not, I want to keep the gap. The gap is good. Why do I have all this empty space here? Like, how did it decide the height of these rows? Is what I want to know. Yeah, so this is actually taking up those. It's just the issue is, oh, I know why. Okay. I was going to try something else. I'm happy I didn't. It just flashed on me. Because the parent here is a grid, right? The parent itself of... because the parent itself here is a grid, let's go back into the DevTools. So this is a grid. That means that this and this are set, the height is a stretch now. Because by default, grid items like flex, they'll stretch to match in height. And that's why the rows are so huge. So what I want to actually do is on my feature grid, I can do an align self of start. Oh, yes, that worked. Cool. Cool. It looks really messy with my grid on now. So maybe we could turn off the grid inspector because everything is more or less in the right spot, right? That's actually nice. Cool. So let's turn off the background colors now because we don't need those anymore. Oh my goodness, what did I do? Okay, that was fine. So there we go. That is more or less what we have here. Obviously we need a hover, so we'll do that first because I think that's the easiest thing. So feature grid A, we'll get a, I don't have to do anything right now. It's only when we hover. There's no transition for that shadow, which is actually a good thing. Because shadows suck, like it's not the best thing for performance reasons. And if you want to know how to do a performant shadow animation, I have talked about it in previous videos, so there should be a card popping up for that. But we don't have to worry about that. So let's do my, I had what we needed. Let's just say feature grid A, I'm gonna do focus and a feature grid A, I put focus. I want focus visible here and I want hover here. So when we hover, or I don't know if they did it, we're here. They don't seem to have, I see it's actually getting selected. They didn't do any focus states, which naughty. Make sure you do have them because it just makes keyboard navigation impossible without it. And I'm doing focus visible, so if I click, it doesn't select it and then keep it highlighted. So if you want to know more about focus visible, I just talked about that the other day. Once again, card. But we won't really, yeah, we will see it in action, I guess. So we're going to do a box shadow on there. It looked pretty big. We're going to do 0, 0, 1. It was pretty big, 2 rem, and it was like, okay, HSL. We'll do HSL because if I do 0, 0% and then this value, so 100% is white. And then, so let's see what that even looks like. So now, it's a little bit too bright and a little bit too big. So I'm going to drop that down to a 1.5. And to drop the opacity on it, like for me now, I can just come here and do a 0.8 or something. So it's just an easy way to drop the opacity on that. And let's go see what that looks like. I broke it. Oh, because I put commas. If you do commas, you need the comma 0.8. If you do spaces, then you do the slash 0.8. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Cool. All right, so just a really quick aside before we keep going with this. This is part of an ongoing series. The last one I did had a lot of positives around it where I just build something out as I go. You see my mistakes, you see me trying to figure things out. And so if you're enjoying this and you like this approach and you want to see me build something, there's a link down below where you can submit things that you'd like to see me build. Can't promise that I'll get through all of them. I will get through very few of them probably. I plan on trying to do one of these videos maybe once a month or so. And what I'm going to do is just go into the submissions, choose the first one I think looks cool and looks fun. I'm going to build that out. So there's a place where you can put in the link and a little short description of what you'd like to see me build, because it's usually a component type thing rather than a really big site or something. So if you have any ideas you'd like to submit, that is down below. Now let's jump back into the rest of this. One thing that's a little annoying, I noticed, is see how we have a hard edge on this? And on these, it's actually a round edge. So I just assumed the pictures I got would be rounded off, but clearly they're not. So we do need to select these links and say that these links have a border radius, which is pretty big. Border radius of, say, 0.75 m, maybe. And there we go. Now, I didn't think that would solve it. I thought I would have to do an overflow of hidden on there too to stop it from sticking out, but it looks like it worked, and it's weird because the bottom one looks bigger than the top one. But maybe I'm imagining things, or maybe the images I grabbed were really weird, so we will do an overflow of hidden as well. There we go, that actually is rounding them all properly. Okay, so there, we got the rounded corners. I know the sizes are a lot smaller than the finished version. We're gonna fix that. And actually, because of how it's set up, I might set a min width and play around with it, because it does overflow in a way, but it like overflows underneath the text. So that's gonna be a hard thing to do. Another thing we will have to do on the feature grid though, we have that. Let's do my transform actually. So here, we'll do a transition of transform over 350 milliseconds ease in out. And then here on this one, what we can do is my transform scale of 1.15 maybe. They get pretty big. There we go. Oh, maybe a 1.1 is fine. Maybe a bit less, but I'll stick with that. I think that's fine. We're close enough. There we go. Yeah, I think that's actually looking pretty good. Super. I'm happy. So we're going to come on the feature grid now, and let's come on the feature grid itself. We have all the grids set up, and then we want to come and say that we have a transform on this guy as well. Is it just a skew? Isn't it skew? It's not a skew, is it? How do I even do that? You know what it might be? I don't know if we need to preserve 3D on this or not. Is it a rotate Z? Let's just put 20 degrees and see what happens. What's Y? I always get mixed X or Y. Okay, let's do that. And then here, let's do a, is it preserve? Okay. We gotta do some MDMing. MDM preserve 3D. I almost feel like it has to be on the parent though when you do this. Transform style. I knew I was missing something. Okay, transform style. Transform style preserve 3D. 90 should make it disappear. That's what I was thinking. So if it's at 45, so that's rotating this way. You can see how it looks flatter. If we turn that off, it's gonna like stretch back out. So I want on the Y axis should be doing this, but it's not preserving 3D. Which is why this, for some reason, if I change that, nothing is gonna change. I also want the transform origin to be on the right side. Feature grid is inside. Okay, what if we just did class is equal to preserve 3D. And then I don't even know if this is going to work. Dot preserve 3D. Oh no, I'm thinking the wrong thing with the preserve 3D. I do need this, but I think that actually stays here. That actually stays here. And what I want this one to be is perspective. CSS perspective. I need Amit with me. CSS perspective MDN. And yeah, this is how far away you are. So I'm going to put it here. We'll change the class name in a second. We'll say perspective is, I don't know, 10 rem. And this is where I never know, like, how far away from something am I supposed to be. So if I turn that off, is it changing anything? It's not changing anything. I'm sure rotate's the right one though, because the idea is you're rotating it that way, but in a 3D space. Rotate 3D. CSS rotate 3D. I don't think, I was so sure you didn't need to use the rotate 3D though. I was so sure. 1 second. Rotate Y 3D. What if I say that? Can I get more information? See, that's a 3D. Yeah, but you can see even there, it's staying flat. So maybe the perspective is what's going to save me. I was right though. Okay. So X is that way, Y is this way, but the problem is it's staying flat. So I need the perspective. If I'm further away, am I just putting... Wow, I thought this would be easy, and I'm so terrible when it comes to 3D stuff in CSS, but I thought, okay, this should be perspective. Let's call it perspective. Perspective. I thought as long as the perspective was on the parent that it could work, but let's try putting it on the grid itself. Not working there either. Let's put it back on perspective. Let's make sure I have this class name correct, which is here. When I say parent, I thought it could be any of the parents. Wow, I'm so stuck. Okay, so I found out what I was doing wrong. That took me longer than I'd like to admit. But what it was is basically the perspective class that I have here. I don't want it here. It really needs to be the direct parent. So I'm going to remove that from there, and I'm going to add perspective here. Container perspective. Because we're not doing any transforms on this, it won't have an effect anyway. But by having perspective on the parent, so that is, it looks like I broke something there, but let's just collapse that down. Oh, you know, not even on the container. I apologize. The perspective needs to be on this one, the grid columns. And so I'm just going to do perspective right there. And there we go. It mucks it all up. And so by being on the direct parent, so I have this one div here, doesn't matter, we're not doing any transforms on that, but it's giving the perspective to this one. So it turns out I was wrong when I said it just needs to be, I said parent, but I said it could be on anything. It needs to be on the direct parent. The only problem is it's disappeared. I put a border on there because I couldn't figure out if, I'm like, maybe it's turning, but the children aren't for some reason. So it's working now, but it's just gone flying off. So I'm going to turn off this because maybe that, okay, we're on the right track. This is where, okay, so we rotated 40 degrees, but we're really close to it. So I think it's exaggerated. So I'm going to move further away. I think, yeah. So that the further away we get from it, the less effect, like the less strong it's going to be, I think, is part of it. Let's just do like 50 and see what it looks like. So this should probably be a negative 40 instead of positive 40. We're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. And then this number, obviously, you can play with too. And that's one thing I always have trouble with is like, should I play with the perspective or should I be playing with the transform? But it looks like we got there a little bit. Okay, cool. Nice. Now we need it to be bigger because it's not big enough. So this is where we could make it bigger by making the container bigger, but that doesn't I want my container to be a fixed size, because if we look at the actual site here, when we look at this at large screen sizes, it actually still spills outside of the main container a little bit on the side there. And it's definitely like, there seems to be like a container thing being used here, and it's definitely bigger. And then when we get to, when we get to smaller screen sizes and this starts shrinking down, it just starts overflowing out the side. And it actually, I mean, there's something weird going on with its positioning there a little bit. I think we could do that in a nicer way. But we can see that it's actually like going out underneath there. And you can actually, these we can't click on because they're underneath here. But like you can actually still click on some of those, which is kind of interesting. I'm not 100% in love with that in terms of usability. But it's an interesting effect, and we're going to try and get it to work. So actually, I think we can go full screen with this now that we know what we want to do. So how can we do that? So I don't know if this is going to work or not, but that's my feature grid. So what if I said that this has a width of, it looks like a pretty fixed width to me. Let's just say it's 45 rem. It's spilling out the side. So on the, I think it'd be on my body. We just want to have an overflow of hidden, right? Overflow y, hidden x. I always mix those up. There we go. So it's spilling out the side. We're not getting the overflow, so that's okay. And that lets it get a little bit bigger, and I think it needs to actually be bigger than that. So we'll do 55. Okay, so the sizes of things are getting a little better and more in line with what we want them to be. And if you're at a big enough screen size, we can see it. But we actually want that to more spill under what's happening on that side. So I'm going to throw a position on the position of relative. And then I'm going to say that the right is a negative 20 viewport width. Positive 20 viewport width. So the idea is that, oh, see, that doesn't work at all though, because it just keeps sucking it that way. So maybe I actually want to do it the other way around. So it's relative to the, no, I do want it relative to the right side. But the viewport width, it's going to muck it up. So what we could maybe do is a clamp or a min-max, not a min-max, a minimum. Choose the smaller of these two values, 20 viewport width, or 20's pushing it that way, or 0 is always going to, let's just say 5 rem and see what happens. I think it's just locked in at the 5. Okay, let's try that one now. It's not locking in. Actually, what I think it's done is it's actually hit the 5, but it's relative. I'm wondering if perspective is actually. Let's just put a border, 3 pixels, solid, hot pink. Yeah, so it's relative to that maybe. So at like large screen sizes, it's perfectly fine. But then as that shrinks, it goes off. It's sort of what we want in a way, except it's really locked in. I thought that would choose this. Oh, choose the smaller. 5M's always going to be smaller. What if it's 5? I just want it so it can actually like shift around a little bit. See, it does move a little bit there at one stage. So actually, maybe the smaller of the two, this could be like a 30, and this could be a 10 maybe. I just want it to be able to keep shifting to go underneath the text. See there, now it's sliding out underneath the text and then it's coming back in that way. And if we combine that with my grid overall being larger, or my container at like a 75 or something, I think we might be, did I put my, Kevin, this should be 0 and this should be 2 rem, just to keep the sides clear. So there it slides under the text, but it's sort of the opposite of what we want, actually. Okay, so I just played around with a few different things. Really, what I want this number to do is to keep getting bigger. Because if the left, I want it to keep getting into a negative value. So if I do negative 100, it goes that way, negative 200, it keeps going. And I realized with the min-max and stuff, I was trying a lot. It's mucking me up. If I do a calc, and I say calc of -1 times, and then a viewport unit, instead of just doing the negative viewport units, I think, so as my viewport gets smaller, I want that number to get bigger. And there's ways of doing this. So if I do, okay, so what I'm going to do is 50 viewport width for now. So if I just do 50 viewport width, it's there, and the bigger I get, the further off to the right it gets, the smaller I get, it eventually, you know, it stops for whatever reason. Let's just make that smaller. So it's sort of here, and then as I go this way, it's going to go with the viewport, and then it will, you know, that number is relative to the viewport. So anyway, it's sticking to where I want. If I do a -20 viewport width, it's going underneath. But as I go that way, it's actually like doing something weird there. And then this way, it keeps pushing that way because that number, the negative, keeps getting bigger. And basically what I want it to do is the opposite. I want a negative. And if I did that on the right again, let's just try the right. Because as the smaller I get, the more it pulls it to the right that way. And then that way, the more it pushes off of the right side. And then if that's a negative, it doesn't work either, because negative, let's just try 5. Okay, so I actually paused the recording there because I was getting so frustrated with this. And what I did, it looks like I've sort of got something that's working, but it's going too extreme where it's pulling the items really far off. But at the smaller size, it's sort of giving us what we want, I think. And I got an idea from The Holy Albatross, which is by Hayden Pickering, where see, now what I don't know is why I need this, if I need this part here. And I need to experiment with this and play with it more. But basically, let's go and see what value this is giving us. Let's go do an inspect on here. And let's go to my computed and let's find my left value. And I'm hoping, where is it? A, B, C, D. I don't even see a left because I'm on the wrong thing. I'm on my main. So let's go and find it and see what we're actually getting here. I think it's that one, right? Do we have that on? Feature grid. Not on that one. Feature grid. My left is now, okay, so let's look at our left, negative 183. And as this gets bigger, the left is getting smaller. And then as I go this way, the left is getting, or it's more, so as the screen gets smaller, the left goes more and more negative, which was the trouble that I was having before. And basically, which is now exactly what I want. So as the screen gets smaller, the left value gets more negative, and as my screen gets bigger, the left value gets bigger and bigger. The only issue with this is it gets too much right now. And what I don't even know, I put 1,000 pixels minus 100. So if we do that without the -1, let's just see what, Like, could I do this with just negative 1,000 pixels? But I don't think so. I think that times -1 is really important for this. So now if we go back to my dev tools and we look at the left, it's 63. And as my viewport is getting smaller and smaller, that number is getting bigger and bigger, as you can see. And the reason that number is getting bigger and bigger is because it's 1,000 minus 100 viewport. And the viewport unit, as the viewport units are getting smaller. So I think actually I think I sort of had something like this before. And I think maybe what I could just do is a calc of 100 VW times -1 maybe, just so it's inverted. So yeah, except no, that's still not working. And to look at why that's still not working, let's come back to here. So that's at -558. So as I go this way, we're just taking my viewport. My viewport's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but I've turned my viewport into a negative number. This is the same as just saying like -100 VW essentially. So if the viewport is smaller, then if my viewport is, the smaller my viewport gets, the smaller this gets, and it's a negative, which isn't what we want. So we really need a situation like this, where we have a big number minus 100 viewport width. And that means as long as if we do this, and we come and take a look, as soon as so let's adapt this now. So as my screen gets smaller, that number is getting bigger and bigger and bigger now. Now this 1,000 is important here. So it's if my viewport is smaller than 1,000, that number will be bigger, because we're doing 1,000 minus my viewport. So the smaller my viewport, the smaller this value is. So the total calculation here is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger number. The thing is, I don't want it to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I want it to be becoming more and more and more negative. Holy moly, I knew we could get there in the end. So I can do this. Now the problem is with this, obviously, we can either go too far one way or too far the other, and I don't like where it's... we can sort of find, and it's right around here. I put 1,000 I started with 10,000 actually, which was way too big and it just lost it. But this is about 1,000 pixels. So if it stopped moving at this stage, that would be good. And that's when we do this, minus this becomes 0, -1. And then, so this is where like it switches, right? So now we're saying 1,000 minus 1,053. So we're actually getting 53 times -1. But we're getting minus, so it's -53 times -1. So we're getting a positive 53 value now. I don't want that to actually happen. I want it to stop. I want the number not to change once we get to this 1,000 pixels here. So instead of doing that, I'm going to take my calc here, because we can do math inside of min and max functions. So I think what I can do is min. I want the smaller of the two values, because if it's a negative value, it's smaller than 0. So let's say minimum between this entire thing, which I guess, okay, 1 second. I'm going to leave the calc here just for a minute so I can sort of wrap my mind what I'm doing here. So this minimum of all of that, and that's all in my calc, comma, 0. And if I do that, it should mean, let's bring my DevTools up and see the calculated value. And this is where it can be useful to see what the calculated value is, 0. Oh no, that's not going to work. Because now it's just always going to be 0, right? No matter what, or yeah, it's always going to be 0. But no, shouldn't a negative number? Okay, let's just make this. A negative number should be, let's just put -10 pixels here. And 0px. The reason I'm doing that is I'm looking here and it's actually saying it's an invalid property value. So if I would do 0px, does it work? Invalid. It's still saying it's invalid. Why is it invalid? Can you not do a minimum with a negative number? Let's just do 10 and 20. Okay, 10 and 20 is working. -10 pixels and 20. It's saying it's valid now. I think I didn't hard refresh before, and that might have been part of this too. So it is taking the -10. Okay. That had me a little worried. So let's undo back to where we were. And I'm just going to put px. I don't know if that's actually going to solve it. Refresh. No, I'm getting invalid property again on there. Minimum. Oh, wait. Calc, open, close. I'm closing my min here. Silly me. It works now. It works. Oh, okay, thank goodness. Okay, so it's working now. We got something. Okay, so with that, if we did that properly, it's choosing the minimum between those two values. So let's go to my computed. Let's go look at my left. So it's -264. And then as this gets bigger and bigger and bigger, at one point it gets to 0, and then it never gets bigger than 0. So it locks in there, and this way it just slides in like that. I'm actually really happy with that. I paused the recording because I went to go eat lunch because I needed a break because I was going nuts. And if ever you're stuck on something, do that. Take a break. Stop working on what you're doing because you're not getting anywhere anyway. And then come back later when you have a bit more of a fresh mind. And well, I'm actually going to make this like -100 just to cheat a little, to pull it over. Maybe a little bit, maybe -50. Maybe even like a -50, just to get it a little closer on this side. Just because, and I think we actually were matching pretty well the overall design on that now. So here we actually get the whole thing. I think looking at it now compared to theirs, one of my issues I think is my perspective. But actually, let's take a look. Let's go full screen here. And know what we're going to do. I think we're getting pretty close. But let's do that. Let's scroll this one like that and scroll this one here. This screen width is a little bit different. All right, so we've matched the screen widths. So yeah, theirs is less, the overall width looks less and the perspective is less on theirs. And it actually, their things look taller than mine. See how it looks more stretchy here? So we could maybe, I'm wondering if they did something different, but you can see the behavior is actually pretty similar. If we, whoops. So if I shrink, whoops, let's do that just so we can see more. And if I get to that screen width, like we're not far off where theirs was. Obviously the compressed text and stuff makes a difference there, but we're not that far off on how this is behaving overall. My buttons just seem a little bit more stretched than theirs, and theirs seem a little bit taller. It might be where the perspective is being applied to, might be part of it as well, I'm thinking. So I'm going to do one. I'm pretty happy right now, to be honest, where mine is coming from, or what mine's looking like compared to theirs. So let's just tweak. There are, I think, a few tweaks, but that one thing was like where most of the headache was coming from. So if I turn this more, that's at -30. If I do a -40 on there instead, it's going to rotate more. And I don't, let's just do a transform origin of left. Is that going to, that looks a little bit better, but now let's drop that back to a -30 maybe. That makes it easier to deal with, because if I do 0, see how it's like flat, and then if I go to 10, so it's like it's coming out this way, but it's not actually shrinking this side. Instead of doing it from the middle, I find that actually makes it easier to work with overall. And you notice that I'm happy with it, but I find, okay, let's bring this number back to like, if I do, I think they actually did this and then did a translate, is it Z? And then like negative, or okay, one second. This is where, is it doing a translate Z or is it my perspective? What if I made that bigger? Now I think we're getting somewhere. There we go. Yes. Okay, cool. Let's turn off that red box. There we go. And we can turn off my hot pink box. So that's looking so much better. And with that, I can take off So the perspective there made a huge difference. So that fixes that. The next thing is now my negative 50 here. I could bring this back to a 0 to keep my spacing there. Super duper. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm so happy. Okay, perfect. The next thing is as it goes underneath the text, we don't want it. There we go. Okay, so it does. I might have to adjust the breakpoint on that then to come in earlier, just how I set that up. I think it's actually pretty similar, but now what we want is when it's going under the text, we don't want to lose, we want to be able to, we don't want to lose the text. It goes behind a shadow in the actual one. So I'm wondering, I don't want to, normally I want to actually do it. It's kind of annoying because to do this, I was thinking I could do everything just on this featured grid to get it to work, but I need to have a shadow on the left side here to pull this off. And I think it's much easier to put that shadowy effect on the text than anything else. And the thing that's annoying about that is you need to have it, like I can't select the feature grid's sibling before it. I know that's something a lot of people would like to have with CSS that we can't do right now. But pretty much this whole thing becomes the component all the way back up to like here, because we need to have the perspective on this as well. So I'm going to call this feature grid parent, or container, feature grid container. And I'm going to delete the perspective one, because now this because you need to have the text and you need to have this here, I feel like this becomes sort of, this is where that's going to go. And then this, yeah, so I'm going to do it like that. And then we can just say that the class equals feature grid. It's like accompanying text, right? Accompanying, I'll just put text. So we have a feature grid, which now broke because I turned off my perspective. So this is my feature grid container, fixes that. And then my feature grid text gets, this is like anti-BEM, right? Because I have feature grid and then these have these prefix, but that's fine. Then this would have a gradient. Background of linear gradient. I'm going to do an HSL here, and you'll see why, because I can just do 0, 0, or 0, 0%, 0% over 0. That then goes to an HSL 0, 0%, 0% over 1. But for now, let's make this 255, just so we have a color on it, which I don't have. Background, feature grid text. I called it that, right? Feature grid text. Feature grid text. Where's my gradient? I did something wrong, obviously. Feature grid text. I mucked some. Oh, I did. What did I do wrong? Commas. That HSL is good. That HSL is good. Oh, silly. Okay, it is working. You can even see that there's some color there. Now that I put the comma there, let's just do this at 50 then. So we have a color. Aha, okay. Or that's lightness. So let's, I want to have color so I can actually see what I'm doing. So this should be at 90 degrees. Yes. And then I want to put a stop. Let's do it like 60%. That's not right. How do we do it where we do the stops? Or is it the other way around? 60% here. Ah, it is there. Okay. So we have 0 going all the way to 60, and then the color starts, the gradient starts at 60% and does this like final little dash here. And so I think that's actually pretty good. So now we can turn this back to black. So for black, it doesn't matter what your color is, as long as you have a 0 on your HSL. And that works, except it looks like crap on the top. But on the sides, oh, I did it the wrong way around. Undo. I want my color back. Let's turn off formatting here for a sec. I actually want it to be completely the other way around. This should be at 0. Okay, let's give this a color then. 255, 50, and a 1. And let's move this up to like 70%, just so it's more that way. And here, we'll do 50 here too. So yeah, it's nothing, and then into that. I'm gonna move this pretty close to the end. 80, maybe 75, maybe actually, should be fine. Okay, so then instead of it going to a color, we want that to be going to black. So then this becomes 0, so there's 0 lightness in it. So basically we're going from black to transparent is effectively what we're doing there. So as we go underneath, you can see that we hit that gradient and it starts to disappear. This one will actually become like a 0.8, I think is a little bit better. And on this, I'm also going to add some padding of, say, 1 rem all the way around, which is going to help. Still, I have one issue with it sticking out the top here. But that padding is going to help on just the side. I think it looks a little better that way, so it disappears behind. And then I originally did on the feature grid in align self start, but what if we did center on that instead? And let's get this guy the full space here so we can see what's happening. And all right, so at large screen sizes, it's looking pretty good. And then as we go this way, we start losing. These are all buttons that are working. I'm happy with that. And then as it starts to shift, we start losing on the side, which is how the design went. And then at this point, so that breakpoint maybe could be changed a little, so it starts sliding underneath earlier, but then eventually it just starts sliding on underneath there. And we start losing it that way. I think that's perfect. I'm super happy with that. Maybe another, you know what I did do, I'm gonna try one more thing instead of this actually. Let's go back to here. One way we could actually fix that instead of, if we didn't wanna do the align self center, is this background could actually be brought onto the container, I think. Oh, maybe not. Because I think we want to keep this here. And even with the perspectives and stuff, it won't, okay, no, it won't work. Because I knew I had a negative Z index on that, so I was thinking maybe we could do something. So you could do it, I think another nice solution for that gradient, so you could actually get it positioned a little bit better, could be to come and do it with a pseudo element that covers the entire div. So you cover the whole thing, and then you can just get the shadow to be where you want, and you have to worry less about this spilling out the top, even though the perspective could pull it out the top a little bit. But that was a lot harder than I thought it would be. That sliding underneath the text was much harder. But if you like that and you enjoyed watching this, if you want to, I'll put the link to the finished version of this down below so you can fork it off and finish things or tweak it or play with it a little bit. If you enjoyed this and you didn't see my last video where I tried to do a cool border effect, it is right here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, a really big thank you to Stuart and Randy, who are my supporters of Awesome over on Patreon, as well as all my other patrons for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.